I still remember the smell of the lawyer's office that day, stale coffee, old leather, and the faint musk of papers that had seen too many hands. My brother, Matthew, sat across from me, his smug smile plastered on his face like he had already won some prize. His wife clutched his hand tightly, her manicured nails digging into his skin in excitement. And me? I sat there in silence, my palms sweaty, my throat dry. My heart hammered inside my chest, not from greed, but from the weight of the unknown. I wasn't expecting much, but I still hoped. Hoped that maybe, just maybe, my father had left me something that meant I mattered. The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading Father's will. His voice was steady, professional, but every word cut into me like a blade. To my eldest son, Matthew. The lawyer paused to adjust his glasses, then continued. I leave my house located on Oak Ridge Lane, currently valued at $800,000, along with all its furnishings and attached land. The room buzzed with approval. Matthew smirked, squeezing his wife's hand as though the whole world had bent to his will. She leaned over and whispered something in his ear that made them both chuckle. My chest tightened. $800,000. A beautiful home. Security. Comfort. A future handed to him on a silver platter. And to my youngest daughter. The lawyer's voice dipped slightly, almost like he was bracing himself for my reaction. I leave the gas station located in Prescott, Arizona, along with the deed to the land it sits on. The air in the room shifted instantly. Silence hung for a second, and then Matthew let out a laugh, a cruel, sharp sound that echoed off the office walls. His wife joined in, covering her mouth like she was trying to be polite, but failing miserably. A gas station? Matthew sneered, shaking his head. Dad really thought you'd enjoy running a pump in the middle of the desert? Their laughter cut through me, each note heavier than the last. I forced myself to stay calm, to not let the sting show, but inside I felt a storm brewing. My cheeks burned hot, my chest ached. I gripped the edge of the chair, digging my nails into the wood. The lawyer kept speaking, but I barely heard him. Words like balance of the estate and liquid assets floated in the air like smoke, meaningless compared to the humiliation pressing down on me. When the papers were signed and the meeting ended, Matthew strutted out like a king returning to his castle, tossing me a glance that said everything. You got nothing. You are nothing. But here's the thing about being underestimated. When people laugh at you, when they dismiss you, they reveal something far greater than their cruelty. They reveal their blindness. I stood outside the office, the Arizona sun blazing overhead. The deed to that dusty old gas station clutched in my hands. My brother's laughter still echoed in my ears. My stomach knotted with shame. And yet, beneath the shame, something stirred. Something dangerous. Something powerful. Because while Matthew was busy celebrating his prize, I couldn't shake the feeling that my father had left me something far more important than he realized. The gas station wasn't just a business. No, it was a riddle. A test. A key. And I was about to find out exactly why my father had given it to me. They thought it was worthless. They thought I had been cast aside. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, gripping the deed so tightly it crumpled in my hands. My mind spun with questions. Why would my father leave Matthew the obvious treasure, and me this? Unless it wasn't what it seemed. The laughter of my brother replayed in my head like a broken record, fueling me. He thought I was done, finished, forgotten. But I knew, deep in my bones, that my story was just beginning. And so, with the desert wind howling outside my window, I made a silent vow. I would go to that gas station. I would uncover every secret it held. And when the truth came out, Matthew's $800,000 house would look like nothing compared to what I held in my hands. They laughed at me once. They wouldn't be laughing for long. I arrived in Prescott 3 days later. The sun was merciless, hanging in the sky like a ball of fire, the kind that drains the color from everything it touches. The drive itself had been long, the desert stretching out endlessly, as if it were daring me to give up and turn back. But I didn't. The deed to the gas station sat on the passenger seat beside me. wrinkled from how many times I had clutched it, unfolded it, stared at it like it might reveal its secrets if I looked hard enough. When I finally pulled off the cracked highway and saw the place, my heart sank for a moment. The gas station stood alone, forgotten by time. Its paint was chipped and faded, peeling away in long strips that flapped in the dry wind. The once bright sign that must have read Dawson's Fuel and Service was now missing half its letters. Only Das Fu remained, like a broken whisper. The windows were dusty, some cracked, and the door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. The pumps out front were ancient, rusted, sun-bleached, their numbers stuck halfway like they had stopped working decades ago. I stepped out of the car, and the air was still, almost too still, as if the desert itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do. At first, disappointment gnawed at me. Maybe Matthew was right. Maybe this really was worthless. But then I remembered something my father used to say. If something looks useless on the outside, it means you're not looking close enough. I took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The interior smelled of dust and old oil, the kind of scent that clings to everything. Shelves that once held snacks and drinks now stood empty, coated with grime. A faded poster for Coca-Cola from the 1980s curled at the edges on the far wall. Behind the counter sat an old cash register, its keys stiff with rust. A few broken stools leaned against the wall, and an empty glass display case stood cracked near the entrance. And yet, as I stood there in the silence, I felt it. Something was off. Something was hidden here. I began exploring. I ran my fingers across the shelves, the dust coating my hands. I tapped on the walls, listening for hollow spaces. I checked behind the counter, underneath the register. Nothing. But then, in the back, I found a small office. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open. Inside, there was a desk covered in yellowed papers, a broken chair, and filing cabinets with rusted handles. On the wall hung a calendar from 1994, frozen in time, its pages curled and brittle. I opened the desk drawers one by one. Most were empty, except for the bottom one. Inside lay a set of keys and an old leather-bound notebook. The notebook was thick, its cover worn soft from use, its pages filled with my father's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first page was simple. If you are reading this, it means you are where I intended you to be. Do not take this place at face value. Look deeper. The future of our family rests on what you will find. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't just a gas station. My father had left me a trail, and this was only the beginning. I flipped through the pages, but much of it was written in riddles, half-thoughts, codes, and directions that didn't make sense yet. Phrases like, "The floor remembers what the walls conceal." "Not everything buried stays forgotten." "Check the pump that never ran dry." I stared at those words, my heart pounding. I glanced back at the keys in the drawer, 5 of them, all old, their metal dulled with age. Each one had a tiny tag with a number written in my father's handwriting. One said pump number 3. I remembered the pumps out front. One of them, the third one, had looked different. Its nozzle was still intact, unlike the others that were broken. I grabbed the keys, tucked the notebook under my arm, and hurried outside. The desert wind picked up, carrying with it a whispering sound that made me shiver despite the heat. I walked up to pump number 3 and knelt down, inspecting it. The lock on its base panel was old, but still intact. My hands shook as I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The panel clicked open, and inside was a narrow metal box bolted to the frame. I pulled it out slowly, dust falling in clouds around me. My heart raced as I set it on the ground and pried it open. Inside were stacks of papers, old deeds, maps, receipts. But at the very bottom was something heavier, a sealed envelope with my name on it. I held it for a long moment, staring at the familiar handwriting. My father's. The envelope was thick, the paper stiff from age. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. Inside was a letter. "My daughter, if you are reading this, then you already know that what I left Matthew was not the prize. He took the house, yes, but the real legacy is here. The land this gas station sits on holds more than you can imagine. Dig deep. and you will find what others have spent their lives trying to bury. Trust no one, not even family. Especially not Matthew. You are the only one I can trust to carry this forward. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears filling my eyes. My father hadn't abandoned me. He hadn't forgotten me. He had trusted me more than anyone else. And Matthew? He thought he had won. But in reality, he had nothing. I looked back at the gas station. Suddenly, it didn't look worthless anymore. It looked alive. It looked dangerous. It looked like the beginning of something so much bigger. The desert sun was sinking low, painting the sky with streaks of red and gold. As I tucked the letter safely into my bag and locked the panel again, whatever was buried here, whatever secret my father had left me, I was going to uncover it. And when I did, the world my brother thought he ruled would crumble beneath him. I didn't sleep much that night. The gas station had no bed, no working lights, no comfort. I curled up on the floor of the dusty office with only my father's notebook pressed against my chest like a lifeline. Every creak of the old building made my heart race. Every gust of desert wind felt like someone whispering just beyond the cracked windows. But what kept me awake wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The notebook. The keys. The hidden letter. My father hadn't chosen Matthew. He had chosen me. And yet, I didn't fully understand why. Not yet. By dawn, when the first light poured over the mountains and painted the gas station gold, I rose, stiff from the cold and dirt, but more determined than ever. I brewed instant coffee on a small camp stove I had brought, the bitter taste grounding me as I spread the notebook across the desk and began to study it more carefully. The pages were filled with more cryptic notes. Where the shadow falls at noon, the earth will speak. The pump was only the key. The ground is the door. Dig where the desert keeps its secrets. At first, it felt impossible to piece together. But I remembered how my father had always spoken. Never directly, always in riddles, like he wanted me to think for myself. I looked outside. The ground around the station was uneven, dotted with patches of dirt and gravel. But one spot stood out. The far corner of the property, where the earth looked disturbed, as if it had been dug and filled again long ago. I walked out there slowly, the crunch of gravel loud under my boots. The desert stretched wide around me, endless. But here, the silence was heavy, like it was guarding something. I dropped to my knees, pressed my hand against the soil. It was harder than I expected, baked solid by years of Arizona sun. But near the center, the dirt shifted differently under my touch, lighter, looser. That was it. I fetched the shovel I had packed in my car. My hands tightened around the handle, my pulse quickening as I drove the blade into the earth. The sound of metal cutting into dirt was sharp and rhythmic, echoing across the empty land. One strike, then another, then another. The soil gave way slowly, reluctantly, as if it didn't want to reveal what it was hiding. Sweat dripped down my neck despite the cool morning air. My arms ached, but I didn't stop. Every few inches, I paused to catch my breath, glancing at the horizon, half expecting to see Matthew's car pull up, half expecting the desert to rise against me for trespassing on its secret. But no one came. Nothing stopped me. And then my shovel hit something. Not stone. Not root. Something solid, metallic. I froze, my breath catching. I knelt, brushed the dirt away with trembling hands, revealing the edge of what looked like a metal container. Large, rectangular. Its surface eaten with rust but still intact. My heart thundered as I dug faster, clawing away the soil until the full box came into view. It was about 3 feet long, maybe 2 feet wide, sealed shut with heavy latches. I sat back, staring at it, my chest heaving. This wasn't junk. This wasn't worthless. This was deliberate. Someone, my father, had buried this here for a reason. With trembling hands, I scraped away more dirt until I could wedge the box loose and drag it from the hole. It was heavy, so heavy I had to use all my strength just to move it onto flat ground. I wiped sweat and dust from my face, then stared at the latches. They were stiff, corroded, but not unbreakable. I pulled one open. Then another. The lid creaked as I lifted it. The smell of old paper, oil, and time rushed out, thick and musty. Inside, stacked neatly, were rows of old ledgers, maps and files. But what caught my eye first was a small velvet pouch sitting on top. With shaking fingers, I untied the pouch and poured its contents into my palm. Gold. Not jewelry. Not coins. But raw, uncut nuggets. Heavy, rough, glowing with a muted brilliance even under the morning sun. My breath caught. Gold. This wasn't just a gas station. This land, it held wealth. Real wealth. I sat frozen, staring at the pieces in my hand, the weight of them pulling down my palm. My father had hidden this. He had left it for me. And Matthew had no idea. I carefully placed the gold back into the pouch and set it aside, then began flipping through the ledgers. They were filled with numbers, coordinates, notes about shipments, drilling, claims. One map caught my attention. It was of the land beneath the gas station, drawn in my father's careful hand. Several spots were marked with red excess. And at the bottom, scrawled in bold, desperate ink, were the words, "Protect this at all costs." They must never find it. They. Who was they? I didn't know yet. But one thing was certain. My father had left me far more than just an abandoned gas station. He had left me the key to a secret that others had wanted buried forever. And now it was mine. As I packed everything back into the box, sealing it tight, I felt a surge of defiance rise in me. Matthew thought he had won. He thought the house made him the rightful heir, the successful one, the favorite. But here, in the dirt of this forgotten station, I held something greater. Something dangerous. Something that could change everything. And as the sun rose higher, casting sharp shadows across the desert floor, I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. I thought I had time. After dragging the heavy metal box into the office and covering the disturbed dirt with loose soil, I convinced myself I could study the papers in peace before anyone noticed. The desert was vast, the gas station forgotten. No one came out here anymore. But Matthew was sharper than I gave him credit for. It was late afternoon when I heard the sound. At first it was faint, just a low hum on the horizon, carried by the desert wind. But it grew louder, closer. Tires crunching gravel. The faint rattle of an engine I recognized too well. Matthew's truck. My stomach twisted. I scrambled to shove the box under the old desk, kicking dust over it, trying to make it look as though nothing had been disturbed. My hands shook, my breath came fast, but I forced myself to steady, to stand tall. Because I knew something then. If Matthew suspected I had found something, he would not hesitate to take it from me. The truck door slammed. Heavy footsteps crunched across the gravel. Then, without knocking, Matthew shoved open the office door. Well, well, well. His voice dripped with mockery as he stepped inside, towering in the doorway. Look at you, playing pioneer in the ruins. I said nothing at first, just kept my eyes on him, trying to appear calm. He looked around, his gaze sharp, calculating. The office was bare, dust still swirling in the air from my frantic cover-up. His eyes narrowed as they swept across the desk, the corners, the floor. You've been busy. It wasn't a question. I've been cleaning, I replied evenly, folding my arms to hide the way my hands trembled. Matthew smirked. Cleaning, huh? Funny thing, though this place doesn't look cleaner. Looks disturbed. He walked further in, boots thudding, and I had to fight the urge to step back. Instead, I rooted myself where I stood. You think you're clever, don't you? He said, lowering his voice now, almost a growl. Dad left me the house for a reason. Because he knew I was the one who could handle things. Not you. But you always think you're the special one. His words hit old wounds, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. If Dad trusted you so much, I said softly, then why do you feel the need to come here? Why do you feel threatened by me standing in a gas station? For a moment, silence. The kind of silence that reveals the truth more than words ever could. Matthew's jaw clenched. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across me. Because you're hiding something, he said. I can feel it. His eyes darted to the floor near the desk, lingering just a second too long. My heart pounded. but I forced my expression to remain steady. I knew I had only two options: either reveal everything now, or throw him off the trail. So I smiled. A calm, defiant smile that made his face twist with irritation. "You think too highly of yourself, Matthew," I said. "It's a pile of dirt and rust. That's all this place will ever be." For a moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. But then he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If I find out you're lying," he let the words hang in the air, unfinished but heavy with threat. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed out. The truck engine roared to life, gravel spraying as he sped away. I didn't move until the sound faded completely, leaving only silence. Then I collapsed into the chair, trembling so hard I could barely breathe. Because I knew. Matthew knew enough. And it was only a matter of time before he came back. That night, as I lit a lantern and studied more of my father's papers, his words echoed in my head. Protect this at all costs. They must never find it. They. Could they mean Matthew? Or someone else entirely? The deeper I read, the clearer it became. The gas station wasn't just sitting on gold. It was sitting on history, illegal claims, hidden profits, maybe even crimes buried in the desert soil. And now Matthew wanted in. I ran my hand over the box, over the ledgers and maps inside. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not because of the gold, not because of the secrets, but because my father had trusted me. But power is dangerous. And I knew the confrontation with Matthew was far from over. This was only the first battle. I barely slept that night. Even after Matthew's truck had disappeared into the desert, even after the gas station fell into silence again, my mind refused to rest. Every sound outside made me jolt, convinced he'd return to catch me off guard. But what kept me awake most wasn't the fear of Matthew. It was the papers. They called to me. The box sat in the middle of the desk, its rusty edges glowing faintly in the lantern light. And though exhaustion weighed on me, I couldn't close my eyes without knowing what else was inside. So I pulled the box closer, my fingers brushing the dust-stained documents stacked within. The first pages had already stunned me: maps, land deeds, ledgers of transactions written in my father's tidy hand. But the deeper I went, the darker the truth became. Because my father hadn't just bought a gas station. He had hidden something beneath it. The first map I unfolded was drawn in pencil, the lines smudged but still clear. It showed the land around the station, each boundary marked, each acre numbered. But where the gas pump stood, he had drawn a large X in red ink. Next to it, in his sharp handwriting, "Vault." My heart skipped. A vault? I dug deeper, pulling out another folded sheet. This one was a letter, sealed but never sent. The paper crackled as I opened it. "If anything happens to me, the vault remains under the station. Only the one I trust can decide what to do with it. The others will destroy themselves if they ever find it." The words made me shiver. What was in the vault? Gold? Land deeds? Or something worse? Something dangerous enough that he had kept it hidden even from Matthew? I turned to another ledger. This one wasn't neat like the others. The handwriting grew frantic, desperate. Numbers were scratched out, rewritten. Names appeared, then were scribbled over. And in the margins, my father had scrawled words that chilled me to the bone. "They'll come for it. Protect her. Protect her at all costs. Protect her." I dropped the paper, my breath catching. Who was her? Was it me? My sister? Someone else entirely? I rifled through the rest of the documents, searching, needing answers. And then I found it. An old photograph tucked between two sheets. It was worn, almost torn in half, but I could still make it out. My father, standing in front of the gas station, one arm around a woman I didn't recognize. She wasn't my mother. She was younger, her smile faint but determined, her eyes sharp. And in her arms, a baby. I froze. The edges of the photo were labeled in faded ink. Elena, 1974. Elena. I had never heard the name before. My father had never spoken of her. But the way he had written it, the way the baby's face was smudged as if handled too much, made me realize something terrifying. My father had another child, another family, and maybe that child, whoever she was, the true heir to this land. I sank back into the chair, the lantern flickering. My entire life, I had believed my father's legacy was between Matthew and me, the house and the gas station, divided like some cruel joke. But now I wasn't even sure if either of us were meant to inherit anything. Maybe it all belonged to Elena. Maybe my father had built this entire lie to protect her. I pressed my hand to the photograph, tracing the outline of the baby's face. My chest tightened with a mixture of anger, sorrow, and betrayal. Why hadn't he told me? Why had he kept this secret buried, along with the vault? The more I thought, the more pieces began to fit. Matthew's arrogance, his entitlement, the way the will had been split, it all felt like a distraction. My father had thrown Matthew the house, thrown me the gas station, but his real plan had been to hide something far bigger. And Matthew had no idea. Not yet. But if he ever discovered Elena, or the vault, I knew exactly what he would do. And it would destroy us all. The lantern burned low as dawn crept through the dusty windows. I hadn't closed my eyes all night, but I didn't feel tired. I felt alive, pulsing with urgency. I took the photograph, the maps, the letter, and tucked them back into the box. Then I dragged the box out from under the desk and carried it to the far corner of the office, where the floorboards had rotted. With trembling hands, I pried one loose and lowered the box into the hollow beneath. When I replaced the board, I whispered to myself, "Not yet. He's not ready. I'm not ready." Because I knew this was only the beginning. The vault was real. Elena was real. And now I carried a secret bigger than the $800,000 house, bigger than Matthew's sneers, bigger even than gold. It wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about the truth of who my father really was, and who else might come looking for what he left behind. That morning, as the desert sun rose bright and merciless, I made myself a promise. Matthew would never see this box. Not while I was alive. Not while I still had breath in my lungs and strength in my bones. But deep down, I also knew one terrifying truth. Secrets don't stay buried forever. And one day soon Elena, or her bloodline, would come knocking. And when they did, the fight for the gas station would become something none of us were prepared for. I had barely hidden the box beneath the floorboards when I heard it. The low rumble of a truck rolling down the dirt road. Matthew. My stomach clenched. He wasn't supposed to be back this soon. The morning sun had only just climbed over the mountains. Yet there he was, kicking up dust as he pulled into the lot. His tires crunched against the gravel, the truck jerking to a stop with a spray of rocks. I crouched behind the counter, heart pounding. I wasn't ready for him to see me. Not yet, not with the weight of the secret pressing against my chest like a stone. But the front door slammed open before I could gather my thoughts. "Ma." His voice bellowed through the station, sharp and impatient. "I know you're in here." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. Then I rose slowly, smoothing my hands over my skirt, forcing my face into a mask of calm. "I'm here, Matthew." He turned toward me, his eyes narrowing. He looked rougher than before, his hair matted from a sleepless night, his jaw tight with something darker than anger. "You didn't answer your phone," he snapped. "My phone doesn't work out here," I said, steady but cold. He didn't like that. He shifted his weight, glaring at me like a wolf circling prey. "Funny," he muttered. "Funny how you're suddenly spending so much time here. Never cared about this dump before." His words cut, but I kept my face steady. "This was your grandfather's," I said softly. "It's worth more than you think." That made him laugh, short, bitter, mocking. "Worth more? Ma, this place is worthless. Unless..." His eyes darted around the room, scanning the counters, the shelves, the floorboards. "Unless you know something I don't." My pulse skipped. He was sniffing too close. I tightened my hands into fists at my sides, grounding myself. "There's nothing here, Matthew. Just memories." But he didn't buy it. He leaned across the counter, his face inches from mine, his breath hot and sharp with whiskey. "You're lying." The words were low, deliberate. And though I didn't flinch, I felt them slice right through me. Matthew prowled through the office, yanking open drawers, slamming them shut, rifling through shelves. I followed, pretending calm while panic roared in my ears. Every step he took brought him closer to the box under the floorboards. Every slam of a drawer made my heart jolt. Finally he stopped, turned, stared at me with those narrowed eyes. "Tell me, Ma, why'd Dad leave you this dump? He gave me the house, sure, but you? You got stuck with this." He sneered, shaking his head. "Unless there's something here he didn't want me to have." I met his gaze unblinking. Sometimes what we're given isn't what we want, but what we need. It was a foolish thing to say, maybe too poetic, but I couldn't help it. It slipped out like my father himself had whispered it through me. Matthew's jaw worked as he chewed on my words. Then slowly he smiled. A dangerous smile. "You're hiding something." I didn't sleep that night. Even after Matthew stormed out, even after his truck roared down the highway, I sat by the counter with the lantern burning low. My father's words swirled in my head. Protect her. Protect her at all costs. Had Matthew seen the floorboard shift beneath my feet? Had he caught the flicker of fear in my eyes? I couldn't risk it. At dawn, I returned to the office, pried up the board and pulled out the box. My hands shook as I held it close, as though my father himself were trusting me all over again. I wrapped it in an old blanket and carried it outside. Behind the gas station, past the weeds and the rusted oil drums, I found the spot, an old root cellar no one had touched in years. I pried open the hatch, lowered the box inside, and sealed it tight. When I rose, dust covering my hands, I whispered to the desert air, "He'll never find you." But even as I said it, I knew the fight had only just begun. Because Matthew wasn't the kind of man to give up. And the more he believed I was hiding something, the more relentless he would become. Sure enough, 2 days later he was back. This time he didn't bother knocking. He barged in, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. "Where is it?" he demanded. I didn't answer. I said, "Where is it?" His fist slammed against the counter, his eyes wild. "You think I don't know? Dad didn't trust me, he trusted you. But you're too old, too weak to handle it. So tell me where it is before you regret it." Something inside me snapped. For days, I had carried the fear of his suspicion like a stone on my chest. But now, staring at my son, my flesh and blood, spitting threats at me like a stranger, I felt something stronger rise up. Defiance. "This station isn't yours, Matthew," I said, my voice like iron. "It never was. And whatever your grandfather left behind, he didn't want you to have it." The room went still. Matthew's face twisted, ugly with rage. He leaned across the counter again, his breath hot on my face. "You're gonna regret those words, Ma," he hissed. "I'll find it. With or without you." And with that, he stormed out, leaving the door swinging wide behind him. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. Because I knew, truly knew, that he meant it. Matthew wouldn't stop. Not until he tore this station apart. Not until he found the vault. And if he ever discovered Elena's name, the secret baby, the truth of my father's other life, it wouldn't just be my inheritance at stake. It would be all of us. I knew Matthew wouldn't let it go. But I didn't expect him to come back with men. It was 3 days after his last outburst when I first heard the clamor outside. Engines rumbling, shovels clanking, men's voices cutting through the desert stillness. I stepped to the window, my breath catching. Matthew's truck was there, but it wasn't alone. 2 more pickups lined the edge of the lot, their beds piled high with tools. Shovels, pry bars, even a rented jackhammer. My son stood in the middle of them all, arms crossed, barking orders like a general at war. "Start with the pumps. If there's anything hidden here, it'll be near the tanks. Dig deep. Don't stop till you hit something." My knees nearly gave out. The vault. He didn't know what he was looking for, not exactly. But his instincts had brought him closer than ever. And if those men kept digging, if they uncovered the entrance to what my father had hidden beneath this ground, everything would spill out. The secrets. The will. Elena's name. Everything. I pressed my hands against the counter, whispering a prayer. Lord, keep them blind. Keep them blind. The ground shook as the men worked. Dust rose in the air, turning the sunset into a fiery haze. I sat behind the counter, listening to the metallic clang of shovels striking earth, each blow like a heartbeat ticking down the time I had left. At one point, I dared to step outside. Matthew spotted me instantly. Enjoying the show, Ma? His grin was sharp, cruel. Don't worry. When I find what you're hiding, I'll take good care of it. Better than you ever could. The men laughed. I said nothing. I only wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders and turned back inside. But the sound of their digging followed me, relentless, like knives scraping bone. That night they didn't stop. Floodlights lit the lot like daylight, humming against the silence of the desert. The men worked in shifts, digging, hauling dirt, pounding at the stubborn earth. And Matthew, he never left. He stood there with a thermos of coffee, pacing like a man possessed, his shadow stretching long across the broken ground. Through the window, I watched him. My son. My own blood. And yet in that moment, I couldn't see the boy I'd once rocked to sleep, the child who used to tug at my skirt asking for candy. All I saw was greed, a hunger so deep it had swallowed him whole. By dawn, they'd dug a pit large enough to swallow a car. The gas pumps stood tilted, their pipes torn from the ground like ribs. Matthew wiped sweat from his brow, his grin wider than ever. We're close, he muttered. And he was right. Too close. Because I knew, just a few more feet, and the edge of the vault would reveal itself. The air in the station grew heavy. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. If he uncovered that vault, if he pried it open before I could act, the secret would be his. And once Matthew had it, he'd never let it go. That afternoon, as the men paused for water, I slipped outside. My shawl flapped in the dry wind, dust stinging my eyes. Matthew. I called, my voice steady though my heart trembled. He turned suspicious. What? I walked to the edge of the pit, peering down at the jagged earth. This isn't right, I said softly. This land, this station, it was your grandfather's legacy. You're tearing it apart for greed. His jaw clenched. Don't lecture me, Ma. You had your chance. You think he loved you more? Then prove it. Show me what he left. Otherwise, he swept his arm toward the pit. I'll dig until there's nothing left standing. The men shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between us. I met Matthew's stare. You'll destroy everything. And when you do, you'll find nothing but emptiness. But even as I said it, a shiver of dread slid down my spine. Because I knew deep down, I was lying. There wasn't emptiness below. There was truth. And truth was the one thing Matthew could never handle. That night, I didn't sleep again. I sat in the office with the lantern flickering low, hands clasped tight, whispering prayers into the silence. But prayers couldn't drown out the sound. The endless clang of shovels, the roar of the jackhammer, the crunch of earth breaking apart. Hour after hour, the men tore deeper into the ground. And by the time the sun rose again, the pit yawned wide enough to swallow the whole station. And still, Matthew wasn't satisfied. Deeper, he ordered, his voice hoarse but burning. We're close. I can feel it. And I knew he was right. Because beneath that cracked earth, beneath the dust and rubble, my father's vault waited. And with every shovel of dirt, my son drew closer to destroying us all. The air changed that morning. It was subtle at first. The way the men struck the ground and paused, exchanging glances. The way the sound of their shovels shifted, no longer ringing against loose earth, but echoing against something harder, hollower. I froze where I stood behind the window. They had hit it. The vault. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My hands gripped the windowsill so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart beat like a drum inside my chest, each thud louder than the last. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My hands gripped the windowsill, so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart beat like a drum inside my chest, each thud louder than the last. Matthew, one of the men shouted. You'd better come see this. I saw my son jog to the edge of the pit, his face lighting up in a way that chilled me to the bone. He leapt down into the dirt, crouching where the men had gathered. Dust rose in clouds around him as he brushed the ground with his hands, revealing a flat slab of concrete, cracked but solid. "There it is," he whispered, elacing his voice. I knew it. My whole body trembled. He had found the entrance. The secret my father had sworn would remain hidden. The truth I had guarded for decades. And now it lay at my son's feet. The men struck the concrete with hammers, the sharp cracks echoing across the desert. Each blow made me flinch as though they were breaking me, piece by piece. Matthew stood back, eyes gleaming, his grin wide and hungry. "Careful," he barked. "Don't smash it open too fast. If there's something inside, I don't want it ruined." Something inside. The words cut through me. There was more than just my father's will down there. There were letters, documents, memories locked away, meant for my hands only. Not for Matthew's. Not for men who laughed while they tore apart what was never theirs. I whispered to myself, "Papa, forgive me." I couldn't stop him. The ground shook again as the men worked, prying at the edges until the slab shifted with a dull groan, like the earth itself crying out. And then, with a final heave, the entrance was revealed. A square hole, dark and silent, leading into the vault my father had built with his own hands. The air that wafted out was thick with dust and age, a smell that dragged me back decades, to when I was a girl, standing at my father's side as he swore that this station would always hold something sacred. And now Matthew stood at its mouth like a vulture. He climbed down first, his boots thudding against the ladder rungs my father had set so long ago. A flashlight beam cut through the dark, dancing along the walls. "Jackpot," Matthew whispered, his voice echoing upward. The men followed one by one, their lights bobbing like fireflies. The hole swallowed them, leaving only the glow of their beams flickering against the walls. I remained above, trembling, torn between fear and fury. What would they find first? The chest? The letters? The will? Every second they spent inside was a second closer to everything unraveling. Minutes dragged into hours. I paced the office, sat down, stood again, wrung my hands raw. Then I heard it. The cheer. A roar of voices rising from beneath the earth, carrying with it a sound I'll never forget. The scrape of metal against stone, the heavy clank of something being dragged. They had found the chest. I rushed outside before I could stop myself. My shawl whipped in the desert wind as I stumbled to the edge of the pit. And there he was, Matthew, standing at the bottom, his face lit like a boy on Christmas morning. In his hands lay a chest. Old. Rusted. Bound with iron. My father's chest. I nearly cried out, but the sound caught in my throat. Matthew tilted his head back, looking up at me. "What did I tell you, Ma? You thought you could hide it forever. But it's mine now." His words echoed against the pit walls, sharp and final. Mine now. The men helped him haul the chest up the ladder, grunting and straining under its weight. Dust coated their faces, sweat streaked their brows, but none of them cared. Their eyes gleamed with the same hunger as Matthew's. I stepped back as they set the chest on the ground, the metal groaning under its own weight. Matthew crouched before it, running his hand over the rusted surface. 40 years, he said softly. 40 years it's been sitting here, waiting for me. His words stung like poison. It had been waiting, yes, but not for him. It had been waiting for Elena, for the granddaughter my father had chosen. The child meant to inherit everything he had built. And now it was in Matthew's hands. "Break it open," he ordered. One of the men stepped forward with a crowbar, jamming it into the seam. The chest groaned but held firm. Another man joined. Then another, their muscles straining as they pried and heaved. I wanted to scream, to throw myself between them and the chest, to tell them that what they were about to unleash wasn't theirs. But I stood frozen, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the crack as the lid finally gave way. With a screech of metal, the chest burst open. And silence fell. The men leaned in, flashlights beaming into the chest. Dust swirled in the air, thick and choking. Then Matthew reached in. He pulled out the first item, a leather-bound ledger, worn and brittle. Then another, letters tied with ribbon yellowed with age. And finally, the envelope. Thick. Heavy. My father's handwriting sprawled across it. The will. Matthew held it high, his grin stretching ear to ear. This is it, he breathed. This is what you didn't want me to find. His eyes burned as he turned to me, the envelope trembling in his grip. You kept this from me. You tried to bury my future. But now it's mine. My knees nearly buckled. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. Matthew, please. You don't understand. That will, it isn't yours. It was never meant for you. But he only laughed. Oh, I understand perfectly. Granddad didn't trust you. That's why you hid it. You wanted to steal it for yourself. But you won't steal it from me. He tore the ribbon loose, his fingers trembling as he slid the papers free. And I knew in that moment, everything was about to come crashing down.